collective action is a academic term for describing how people get together in groups and get stuff done. And there, in the academic literature, there's sort of two key ideas that identify two of the core challenges with people getting together and trying to accomplish things. And these two ideas are a great introduction to almost everything that comes out of, from my perspective, the study of civics and what needs to be understood and accomplished in order to have a successful group of people working together. And so these are, to me, really key ideas to understand. The contemporary explanation of this was provided by Mansur Olson, and he originally did this work for unions and industrial organization, but it really applies to any group of people who have a shared value that they wish to express in the world. And the key idea is, without any effort to consciously organize the group, and I mean, when we say consciously organize, I mean assign roles, understand who is a member and who's not a member, and what those criteria are, deciding how people are going to communicate, what the rules of those communication are, how information is going to be collected and stored, understanding what members' responsibilities are, etc., etc. If this is not done consciously, as the group gets bigger, the chance that the group achieves their stated aim goes down, which seems obvious, but it's worth understanding why this occurs. And there's two things that come up. One is coordination costs, and the other is the free rider problem. And these show up all over the place once you begin to understand the different ways of building an organization and the different rules and the effects they can have on individual and group behavior and their success. Coordination costs are well illustrated by recalling an experience I think most of us have of doing group work at school, and especially group work when the teacher did not provide any instructions or any guidance for how the students are to communicate with each other, how the students are to divide up tasks, how the students are to take responsibility for each other. All these things have to be modeled, and if they're not, you get a mess. And so, I have never heard anyone give an answer of no to the question, did the group size matter for ease of completing the project? Yes, the group size matters. It makes it a lot more difficult. Why is this? Depending on which social science department you're at in university, they might give you a different answer about culture or folks' different ways of emotional relating, sort of inequality of opportunity, all kinds of things. But there's a more fundamental issue that is basically mathematical in nature that I'm going to call here the pecking order problem. And so if you have a group of chickens, when you introduce a new chicken to the flock, it sets off an attempt to reestablish a pecking order. And this is effectively a computational problem. If you have a background in computer science, you're going to recognize this as a sorting algorithm. The chickens sort themselves out into a biological hierarchy. And one of the characteristics of this problem is that as the number of chickens grows, the number of possible orderings grows factorially. It's a lot of pecking. when you introduce these chickens together, if they're not familiar with each other, there will be a lot of chicken to chicken violence establishing the hierarchy, and it can take a long time to sort out this hierarchy. If you observe humans in meetings where they're unfamiliar, so this can be a volunteer organization where the volunteers are not familiar with each other ahead of time. It can be in corporate environments where different departments are bringing people together who don't usually work together. You'll end up with this endless going around about sort of like taking time to figure out who has the responsibility to organize meetings, who's got the responsibility to assign tasks. This goes on and on and on and on and on. And there will even be efforts to make explicit the pecking order. Some ways this is unavoidable, but really we want to look for established rule sets that, and there's many, many, many to choose from, that make this process less painful, and ways of getting people to understand roles and responsibilities in an efficient way when they're not familiar with each other. But it's important to recognize that coordination costs are expensive. They're computational in nature. So to go back to the chicken example, each peck is like a computation to figure out which one is higher up the hierarchy than the other. And as the group size grows, the number of possibilities grows factorially, and that's a lot of processing in order to understand where the roles and responsibilities should be. It's really important in actually running an organization or building an organization to understand that in human settings, we generally do not explore all possible permutations of the ordering or the assignment of roles. It usually sorts itself out based on, or the number of possibilities gets pruned by individual's own way of relating. And this can be counterproductive in terms of achieving the group goals. So assertive and aggressive individuals are going to exert greater influence on conversations, rule-making, decision-making within the rule sets that are already established, and also in setting those rules. And assertiveness and aggressiveness does not automatically imply the greatest insight. And the group is going to need to work with those who may be avoidant to bring out their observations and idea, etc., out, so that you actually get the information included in your decision-making process that gets the group going where they need to be going. The second big thing that comes up in organizing groups is the free rider problem. If we continue with the classroom group work example, most people have experienced this. If all members of the group are going to receive the same mark with no adjustment for individual effort, and the individual does not have a personal attachment to any of the group members, they're not particularly empathetic, and all they care about is minimizing effort for the grade they get, they're going to be lazy. Now, if group members are friends, or everyone has a personal interest in the subject matter, then you may not have this outcome. But pretty much every experience I've ever had in group work, both in a classroom and a corporate setting, involves someone who is putting in significantly less effort than their peers. Socially, there's a few ways that this has been handled historically. One is social norms. Shame and punishment, it can be a very powerful motivator not to free ride. What we've found with the internet, large corporate environments, large bureaucracies, is that the group gets larger and larger. It can be more and more difficult to identify shame and or punish free riders. And so this is not working the same way it used to be. And we're also, I think, seem to be, and this is probably a good thing, more and more human beings seem to be less prone to being susceptible to social shaming. Um, so this doesn't sort of need to come up with other ways of getting people to work together in groups. How we solve this problem in the modern age from the perspective of sort of what we would call the provision of public goods like national defense. If everyone's self-defense was left up to themselves, you would find that many people would rely on their neighbors to provide the services, and the total service provided to society is less than optimal. We've had coercive government come in and tax and provide the service closer to the optimal amount. Another way of dealing with this is private provision. As long as people can be effectively excluded from a good, then they can be charged an entry fee, and you end up with a solution to the free rider problem. There are many other ways of solving this problem that do not involve government and don't involve private provision that will be talked about in future videos.